Good morning. Don Koones here, of course, lecturing again. I must tell you that I'm, in a way, getting used to this, but I really do miss everybody. I miss meeting people at the door and saying good morning and so on, and I really miss your reaction within the room and so on. So that being said, we're going to go on today. Today's lecture has to do with a very famous female artist from the Philadelphia area. And I want to begin today by telling you how I got into this subject at all. I was doing the tour at the state capitol in Harrisburg. And I want to say one thing about our Capitol building. I've said this many times and I believe it. Our Capitol building is probably, in my estimation, one of the most beautiful Capitol buildings in the United States of all 50 states. We have a very beautiful Capitol building. It's a shame many people, even from Pennsylvania, have never been in the Capitol. Well, here's the point. I had been at the Capitol, and when you come into the Capitol, into the rotunda, you have a choice to make, and there are various tours that you can take. And up until recently, there was one general tour. And that was a good thing, because of many people who come into the state capitol come in from another state. They just want to see the rotunda, they want to see the Senate, they want to see the House, they want to see, perhaps if it's open, the Supreme Court, and that's it. They just want a general overview of the Capitol, and then they move on. And what I felt was sad was when we got in some particular rooms, like the Senate, there was a pause there in which they talked about the chandeliers, and they talked about the carpeting, and they talked about the marble that was used. However, in the artwork, they simply would say, and this depended on the guide, the artwork in this room was done by Violet Oakley. And with that, they would just move on and go on to another subject. And so I got interested in this, and I thought, there must be more to say about that artwork. All this beautiful artwork, it certainly means something, but in the general tour, it wasn't discussed. It was passed over. So I made an appointment, went down to the Capitol, and talked to the people in charge, and got involved with studying Violet Oakley and her paintings and so on and so forth. So that's what I'm going to do today. What I want to do today is what they don't do at the Capitol. They don't stop and explain the paintings and so on and so forth. They simply say who it was who was responsible, and then they move on. Today, you're going to have even more of an insight. Well, nevertheless, let's get to it and see what happens. Again, in 1897, there was a terrible disaster in the city of Harrisburg. There was a Capitol building built at that time, but in 1897 there was a terrible fire and the Capitol burned to the ground. Well, in 1898, the year after, Henry Ives Cobb won a design competition, and they thought they would start building the new Capitol right away. The only problem was there was a problem with finances. So again, it was put on hold. So you have Capitol Hill, but nothing on it. In 1901, at the turn of the century, John Miller Houston came to Harrisburg, and he was hired to design a new building. And Mr. Houston said, I'm going to build a new building, but the new building will be a palace of art. And indeed it is. If you've ever been to our state capitol, it is a palace of art. Well, next thing we have to do is hire personnel. And he hired Edwin Austin Abbey to paint all the murals, Roland Hinton Perry to do all the sculptures, William Branton Van Ingen to do all the stained glass, and Henry Chapman Mercer to do the tile floors. Notice as I'm going through, I've only mentioned men's names. You've got to understand, this is the early part of the 1900s. In most cases, if you're going to hire someone, you're going to hire a man in this particular case. By the way, this they don't tell you on the tour, but this I thought was very interesting. When Mr. Houston sent out the invitations, who would like to do some work on this, there were two people that were, at that time, other commitments and couldn't come. The one was Louis Comfort Tiffany, could not come, can you imagine? And the other they invited Well, she couldn't come. She was on her way to France. Mary Cassatt was invited to come to Harrisburg. So you can imagine if these two people would have showed up, what an attraction it would have been for today. Well, anyway, we're all ready to go. We're all ready to start the construction. However, Edwin Austin Abbey, who was hired to do the murals, died, unexpectedly died. They then asked another man, John White Alexander, you come and do the murals. Well, John White Alexander came and did not last very long at all. There was a health issue and he had to leave. At that point, John Huston does a very, very, very different type, Joseph Huston, a very different type of arrangement. He hires a woman. He hires a woman, and that woman's name was Violet Oakley from the Philadelphia area. Violet Oakley. Now, before I get into what Violet Oakley is going to do, what she's going to be asked to do, I want to tell you a bit about Violet Oakley. Who is Violet Oakley, and why would Joseph Huston call Philadelphia and ask Violet Oakley to come? Well, let's get started. Violet Oakley was born in Jersey City, New Jersey. She was born right here on the East Coast. She was the third daughter of Arthur Oakley, and she was baptized. Normally, I don't say this. You probably say, well, what does that have to do with the story? It has a lot to do. She was baptized in the Episcopalian Church. She had two older sisters, and by the way, we can make an adjustment on that right away. The two older sisters were Nellie and Hester. Nellie and Hester. Nellie will die of diphtheria. So now Violet only has one sister, Hester, who is older. Well, the parents, when she started growing up, this is Violet, were overly protective because of the fact she had asthma. And so they're overly protective. However, they noticed that she has a talent for drawing and art. Well, that I could understand. Her father was interested in art. Her grandfather was interested in art. And her mother had two art galleries, one in Boston and one in San Francisco. So the apple doesn't fall from the tree. There you have Violet Oakley, and of course, mother, father, grandfather, all interested in art, you see. Well, we're going to take the sister now and just put her aside. I'll tell you why. Hester was interested in writing. She wanted a degree in writing, and so she went to Vassar. She's pretty well out of the picture now. Hester leaves, she goes to Vassar. In the meantime, Violet joined a group of art students, a league up in Utica, New York. And she did, as a teenager at that time, she did some work in Utica, New York. In the meantime, the parents, being relatively affluent, are arranging to go on a trip, and they take Violet with them. So in 19, 20, 21 years of age, where's she at? Well, the first place they stop is Gibraltar. They went to Morocco. From there they went to Nice, France. From there to Paris. And they finally ended up in London. In fact, they'll spend so much time in England that Violet will do some study while she's in England. She's very interested in art and art history, so this fills in very nicely. The family came back to the United States. They first lived in New York. Then they lived in, of all places, Atlantic City. You wouldn't expect me to say that. And finally, the Philadelphia area. And that's, of course, where she gets her education. At age 22, she entered the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and she is now going to Drexel University, and she's going to study under a very famous illustrator at that time, Howard Pyle. Now, if Howard Pyle rings a bell with you right away, it should. Howard Pyle is, of course, the mentor and instructor of N.C. Wyeth. N.C. Wyeth, Andrew, there we have it, Howard Pyle. Well, here we have it. Violet Oakley, her husband, in this case, her mentor, Howard Pyle, and she's at Drexel. By the way, one other thing about Howard Pyle, he's not only her teacher, but again, I'm going to mention his religion because it's going to mean a lot to her life. He's a Quaker. He's a Quaker. So she'll hear a lot about the Quaker religion, so on and so forth. Well, anyway, Violet, of course, studying at Drexel, as is probably not uncommon at time, many of the girls and so on that are studying art and so on kind of band together and work together and so on. And at this time, she teams up with two other women, Jessie Wilcox Smith and Elizabeth Shippen Green. The three come together and work together. Violet's going right up the ladder. In fact, she's interviewed at this time to do some work. And where? Tiffany's in New York. Have her come in and gave her some interviews and so on. So she's moving right along. This, again, is a change in her life. And in a way, I find this a little humorous. When she was in England, she met a woman by the name of Mrs. Lascar. And it's at this time, Mrs. Lascar has come to the United States for whatever reason, touring, whatever, and she looks up Violet Oakley. She says, remember when you were in England and so on. And Violet says to her, you're in very good health. She says to Mrs. Lascar, you're in very good health. And Mrs. Lascar says to you, well, how's your asthma doing? And of course, Violet said, oh, my asthma's terrible. Suffer terribly from asthma. And Mrs. Lascar says to her, you know what? I think I'm healthy and well because of my religion. I'm Christian Scientist. Violet takes that seriously and changes from Episcopalian to Christian Science. In fact, after she did this, she said her asthma disappeared. Well, I don't know. We'll have to check that out. I know I can't see you, but I know a lot of you are probably smiling and laughing. Well, anyway, let me go on. Remember I said she teamed up with two other women, Jessie Smith and Elizabeth Green. Well, these three ladies now move into a place altogether. It was called the Red Rose Inn. It was nothing more than an elaborated farmhouse. They all moved in together. In fact, if you study history at this time, art history of Philadelphia, they're called now the Red Rose Girls, the Red Rose Girls. Well, let's get back to how this all came about. Mr. Houston will ask Violet Oakley to come to Harrisburg. Now, I want to get something straight right away. She didn't come to Harrisburg and paint the murals in Harrisburg. She's going to come to Harrisburg, she's going to take the measurements, she's going to go back to Philadelphia, she's going to paint the murals, and then the murals are transported here to the capital city, you see. And I want to talk about something else. He says to her, you're hired. I'm going to give you a job to do. I want you to do the governor's reception room. However, listen to this. Remember all the men I said that were hired up until this time? Those men were on a standard, regular, weekly salary. When Violet Oakley was hired, because she was a woman, they told her, this is the job you have to do. Do the job, and then we'll see how the job comes out, and then we'll decide how much we're going to pay you. By the way, we find that odd today because, remember again, it was a man's world. But what I think is interesting is, I'm just moving ahead here, she does the governor's reception room. She does an excellent job, and what's the result of it? She says to them, now you'll put me on regular salary. And they do, and they do. Well, anyway. He says to her, I want you to do the governor's reception room. Now, here's how I'm going to handle it today. I'm going to run through all that she does, and I'm going to do the explanation. Then when I'm done with that, then you're going to walk with me through the rooms, and we're going to actually look at the art pieces at that time. So I'm going to talk about them so that when you see them, you're going to already start to understand what in the world she's doing. So he takes her to the governor's reception room. Now, if you go there today, it's a rather large room. One end is a huge fireplace, and on either side are doors going into the governor's office. And as you would expect, if you have an appointment with the governor, you go to the governor's reception, and that's where you wait for the governor to come out and of course, start the meeting, or someone comes out for you. At that time, the walls, 3/4 of the way up, were paneled, you see. However, when that paneling stopped and then onto the ceiling, there was nothing. There was just plastered walls. It was just paneling part way up and then plastered walls. when Violet Oakley came, she measured that area that was the plastered area. And he said to her, the governor said, the people that were hiring her said, "What will the topic be?" And she said, "It's only appropriate that if you came to see the governor of Pennsylvania, you'd have to know the story of William Penn." And so in that area, the governor's reception room, I'm going to paint, the panels are going to be the life of William Penn. And that's what's there. Now, let me explain something else about Violet Oakley. Violet Oakley, in her paintings, loves to tell a story. And I think many, many times today, as we go through the governor's reception room and the Senate and so on, I wonder how many people today in office walk into those rooms every day and have no idea what's on the wall. They just walk right past it. It's not of importance and they just go past it. I know when I did the lecture one time at the governor's reception room, I had the guards in the group because they want to know what the paintings were all about. Nobody ever mentioned the paintings. They worked there for years. Well, nevertheless, she wants to tell a story. And she's almost like someone doing a Broadway show. She just can't tell you the story. She has to have a background. She has to tell you what's going on in the world before you hear the story. Because if you know what's going on in the world, then you'll appreciate the story, you see. Well, she's going to do William Penn, but she's going to tell you what's going on in the world just before William Penn, just before William Penn. So before she gets to him in the room, she's going to, on the first wall over here, she's going to be doing some background information. For instance, what's happening at this time or has just happened. And what has just happened is the Reformation. The Reformation, the breaking from the Catholic Church, you see, the Reformation, Martin Luther, the 95 Theses, the splitting of Europe, nations going Protestant or Catholic, a war, the 30 Years' War. There is great upheaval and there's great turbulence in Europe at this time. And that's what she wants you to know on this wall. She wants you to know that she's just not going to say, well, William Penn was born and no. She wants you to know the world that William Penn was born into, what was going on in the world, so that you understand it as you're going around the room, you see. Well, she starts over here, and the first man she has there is William Tyndale. Now, what? Most people, who's that? Who in the world is that? Remember, at this time is the Reformation. Luther has just translated the Bible into German, into a tremendous step. Translate it into German, the common language. Well, what's William Tyndale doing? He's picking that up. He's translating the Bible into English. He's translating it into English. So those first blocks there's William Tyndale translating the Bible. However, she wants you to know that there is turbulence and confusion going on. And William Tyndale did a wonderful thing translating the Bible, but he was very critical of Henry VIII and his marriages, and said so openly. So you have William Tyndale translating the Bible being introduced now into England, but the next picture is William Tyndale tied to a stake and being burned alive for criticizing the king. Again, what's she showing you? There's turbulence. She didn't even get to William Penn. Forget William Penn. She wants to show you on this wall, there's horrible things going on right now. There's tremendous upheaval. There's Tyndale. I wonder how many people today will walk past William Tyndale burning at the stake and never look at it twice, you see. The next panel, she has a woman. Anne Askew is her name. Anne Askew. Anne Askew was critical of the Catholic Church. She said she does not believe that Christ is present in the Eucharist. In fact, she said the Eucharist after 3 days is nothing but moldy bread. That was her. Well, she is arrested and she is being tortured, you see. Arrested and tortured. So there, Tyndale, Anne Askew, she's showing you turbulence and upheaval and unsteadiness. Everything is unsteady, you see. Then she goes to the next block. The Tudors have just ended their rule in England. Elizabeth is dead. They're now in the Stuarts, James I, Charles I. And James I came to the throne of England believing in a theory that wasn't very popular. You see, when James I came to the throne of England, he told everybody he believed in divine right of kings. What does that mean? It means that when I, the king, tell you to do something, you better do it. Because I'm not telling you to do it, God is telling you to do it. God speaks, the words come through the air, comes into my head and out of my mouth. So you don't disobey me because, of course, you'll be disobeying God. The English people were not happy with that. You have a constitutional monarchy, you have the House of Lords, the House of Commons, and so on. They are not happy with that. And the problem was when his son came to the throne, Charles I, he had the same idea as his dad, divine right of kings. Very much hated. But Charles I took one step too far. He closed the doors of Parliament. And when he closed the doors of Parliament, there was a young parliamentarian by the name of Oliver Cromwell, jumped up and said, "The king can't get away with this." And Oliver Cromwell got an army together. They were called the Roundheads. And the king got an army together. They were called the Cavaliers. England is at civil war. Parliament against the king. And Charles I, the king, will be captured and he will be beheaded, you see. What does she have in the third panel? She has Oliver Cromwell on horseback. She has the Roundheads and the Cavaliers fighting. Here's a man being burned. Here's a woman being tortured. Here's England in civil war. All of this turbulence she's showing you. All these horrible things are going on, all at practically the same time. Then she gets to the final panel before she gets to William Penn. And here we have a man standing on a mountaintop. A man standing on a mountaintop. And the man's name is George Fox. George Fox founded the Quaker religion. And George Fox is up there, of course, the Quaker religion. He's saying people should go to God directly if they have a problem. He's saying that women are equal to men spiritually. Whoa! He's saying you should have equal treatment in the New World for Native Americans. He's saying you should have equal treatment for Black Americans. He's saying that there should be no wars anymore. George Fox is a conscientious objector. So, turbulence, 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 and then she shows George Fox, the Quaker religion, you see. Now she's ready. Now she's ready. She took a whole wall, but she's ready. She's showing you the turbulence and upheaval in the world. Now she's going to get to William Penn. And when she gets to William Penn, who is it she cites first? William Penn's father, Admiral Penn. Admiral Penn had a distinctive service in the Queen's Navy, you see. Admiral Penn. He was very, very highly respected. He had a lot of money, a big house in London, you see. Very, very much high society, high society. And they have a son, William. Well, that's all well and good. And you can understand this. Admiral Penn wanted the best education for his son. And he sent him to school, but the only problem was, he probably had the same problem a lot of parents have today. William liked to party. And Daddy was not happy with low grades, so Daddy packs him up and sends him over to France. And the education improves, the grades come up, and everything looks like we're all going to live happily ever after. And William Penn comes home, and he's doing some work at Oxford University. And one day, I don't know, maybe it was a lunch break, I don't know, but it changed his life. He was leaving the buildings at Oxford and went for a walk down the road. And as he's walking down the road, he sees a big open field. And in the big open field is a tree. And there's men gathered around the tree, you see. Now, what he doesn't know, the people gathered around the tree are Quakers. They're having a meeting. Why are they having a meeting? Because Oliver Cromwell has taken over the government, and Oliver Cromwell is not tolerant of Quakers, Puritans, Pilgrims. He thinks these people are all weirdos. So when they have meetings, they have to meet almost in secret, you see, because of the government. There's that turmoil again. Curiosity killed the cat. William Penn is looking at these people in the middle of the field and wondering, what are they talking about? So he ventures into the field. Here's the whole thing. We are Quakers. We believe people are equal. We believe, we're conscientious objectors, on and on and on and on, you see. William Penn is very impressed. Very impressed. Now, he decides a big thing. He's going to become a Quaker. Remember, Daddy at home is a real big number in the Episcopalian Church at that time, you see. And Violet Oakley waits till she gets halfway around the room over that fireplace with this big mural in telling William Penn's story, where I think it's the pivotal mural. It's the pivotal mural, because it's the mural where William Penn goes home and tells his father he is going to become a Quaker. And hasn't that happened in different circumstances during our lifetime? And will it not happen again that teenagers come home and say, guess what, I've decided to, and we all hit the roof, you see. That scene is pivotal. William Penn's father is screaming at him, get out of the room, and I never want to see you again. You are no longer my son. By the way, William Penn will never see his father again. Get out of the room. I don't want to see you. Don't come back again. And William Penn is leaving. You'll see the mural later. He's leaving with his head bowed, you see. But as he's leaving the room, Violet Oakley tells us something else, you see. Because as he's leaving the room, there's a big dog following him. And William Penn has his one hand extended, and the dog is licking his hand. The dog is a Great Dane, and the Great Dane is the state dog of Pennsylvania. The Great Dane, you see. The dog, as if the dog is saying, move on. Better things are coming, you see. Well, the next scene isn't too happy. William Penn, of course, in jail. He's in jail, you see. But he tells other people in the jail, someday I'm going to get out of here, and we're going to go to a place where everybody can live together. We won't have all this strife and tension and upheaval. We're going to go to a place where it doesn't matter who you are or where you came from. We're all going to live together, you see. Well, time goes on, and William Penn's father dies, as well as the king dies. And Oliver Cromwell is out of office, and the new king takes over in England, you see. Charles II. And Charles II sends a note to William Penn in jail and says, I want to see you immediately. And William Penn goes to the king, and the king says, here's the story. I owed your father money, and your father's dead. You have your choice. I'll give you the money, or I'll give you a piece of land in the New World. Wow. The next painting, of course, William Penn accepts the land, and he's pointing towards the ocean, and all these people are coming with him. And the last panel up here, he's on his ship, the Welcome, you see, the Welcome, and he's looking overboard. What will await him in the New World? Well, we know Pennsylvania, Penn's Woods, Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, you see. There it is. And that's how Violet Oakley does. Again, I say, it's kind of interesting, because if I took someone in that room right now out of the hall in the Capitol building and said, explain, I have no idea what they're looking at probably. Well, she's done with the governor's reception room, and they are overly pleased, overly pleased. They said, listen, we have somebody to do the House of Representatives. Would you do the Senate? Would you do the Senate? She said, yes, she'll do the Senate. Again, remember, anything you see in Harrisburg, those huge, they were all done in Philadelphia, brought by train up to Harrisburg and installed in the Capitol. So, we're going to go in the Senate chamber now. Again, If you're saying to me at this point, oh, this is all getting confusing, you're talking about so much. No, 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 it will all come to bear. You'll understand it perfectly when we go to the paintings later on. Then it'll all come together. Let's go to the state Senate. Now, when you come through the Senate doors, you look down front, and your eyes are going to be lifted up right away, up. Because there's a figure way up off the floor, up near the ceiling of the room, a figure, a woman in blue, in blue. And this woman not only is in blue, but she has her hands stretched out like this, and she's in water. She's in water. The woman is symbolic. She means unity. Unity. So if I go in and we see that figure up on the wall, that's unity. She's sitting, or rather kneeling, in the waters of life. The waters of life. Now that in itself means nothing. You got to see the whole picture, you see. There's unity, the waters of life, right in the middle of the Senate, right way up over. Now, if I go to the extreme left of that wall, all the way over in the corner, you see, I see the army. I'm going to know two things that really irritated Violet Oakley, and one was war. She hated war. She couldn't understand why people have to kill each other over nothing. In her terms, nothing. So, unity is in the middle, and way off on the left-hand side in that corner are the armies of the world. You'll see men with guns, World War I, guns, flags from the nation. People are ready for war. But as you come across the wall and you get closer to unity, they put down their guns. And the guns and so on are, of course, the swords are hammered into plowshares. In other words, here's unity in the middle. The extreme over here is war, but as you work yourself across to unity, because it's getting close to all this subsides, and there isn't war anymore. Now, over in this corner, you would look to your right as you're coming in, there's the other thing that irritates her, slavery. Slavery. And in that far corner, you have black slaves in chains, you see. Black chains. But as you come across the wall closer to unity, all the chains fall off. All the chains fall off. In fact, she even has painted in the painting over here, Dante, because Dante believed in social equality. She also, and this is interesting, she even painted somebody right there, someone who was living at that time, Jane Addams, of course, who gives us Hull House in Chicago, who believed in helping with social problems. So there it is. You have unity in the middle, you see, in the fire, in the waters of life, you see. And over here, unity is taking care of war, because as war gets closer to unity, there is no more war. Over here, she has slavery. As the slaves get closer, they drop their shackles. There is no more, you see. Everyone's coming. Who does she put right next to unity? The three magi. You see. One is Caucasian, of course. One of the three kings, of course, Middle Eastern, looks like he's from Saudi Arabia, and of course one from Africa. They're all near unity. Well, what does that mean? Everybody coming together, unity, bringing it together. See? Now, she had to do the left side over here of this wall, and she had to do the right side. On the left side, what's near and dear to Pennsylvania, of course? The American Revolution. The American Revolution. And on this side over here, she has George Washington on horseback going through the streets of Philadelphia. George Washington, equestrian, horseback. And with Washington is a very impressive painting. It's the Continental Congress. Remember what I told you about Violet Oakley? You don't look at the picture because she has a story to tell you. She's going to tell you a story. In the picture are the men working on, of course, as you know, the Declaration of Independence, then the Constitution and so on. But there are the George Washington's in the picture, you see. Benjamin Franklin's in the picture, you see. John Hancock in the picture. There they are, famous Americans, all white. But in the painting, a book has fallen from the table and is laying on the floor. And the one who is stooped over picking up the book is a black man. You can almost take the painting and draw a line right across it. And then you hear what they're talking about in Philadelphia. All men are created equal. No. She's putting the line. Oh, there's no line. It's invisible. There's the line. The whites are up here. Here's the black picking up the book off the floor, you see. There's a message there. The whites up here, all men are created. Well, that doesn't include women. It doesn't include blacks. It doesn't include Native Americans. Message. The black is picking up the book. Now let's go to the right-hand side. If we have the American Revolution there, Pennsylvania, a big part of it, then we have to have the American Civil War on the other side. And there on the other side, of course, you have George Gordon Meade from the Battle of Gettysburg on horseback. Washington over here on horseback, George Gordon Meade over here on horseback at Gettysburg. Big battle, of course, the turning of the Civil War, the preservation of the Union. But although the Constitution is on this side, what did she put on this side? The Gettysburg Address. And there you have Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address. Very impressive, very impressive. But she's a message. She's a message. She's not content showing you Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address. She has to tell you a message. And in the message is Lincoln is standing much as a podium like this, and he's giving the Gettysburg Address, and he's up on a pedestal, and the people are standing down here, and there's a woman standing in front of him. And the woman has two little children. Two little children. Her name is Mary Bowman. See, we even know who she didn't make it up. We know who it is, Mary Bowman. She's trying to tell you, yes, glorious war and this and that and battle strategies and blah, 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 blah. But she said, what she's trying to tell you is there is an unspoken part of war, and the underspoken part of war is Mary Bowman there with two little children to raise, and she has lost her husband in the war, and she has lost her father in the war. That's what we don't talk about. Interesting. Anyway, you'll see them all. I'll show them to you. Now, I didn't get to my favorite painting. When you come into the Senate chamber, when you're way at the back of the room, not the front that I've been talking about, but when you come through the door, if you look on either side, there's a painting on each wall in the back. Now, you actually have to come into the Senate and turn, and then you'll see these two big paintings. I'm going to start at the painting at the left. It reminds me of Oprah Winfrey. How in the world did I come up with Oprah Winfrey? There was a ship sailing up the east coast of the United States, and the ship was filled with slaves. Slaves. And the ship put into Philadelphia. The ship put into Philadelphia. Well, what do we have in Philadelphia? Quakers. All men are created equal. Quakers. And the painting is the ship. You're in the ship. There are all the slaves in shackles. And there's a man standing right in the middle. And his name is John Woolman. He's the head of the Quaker Society of Philadelphia. John Woolman comes aboard the ship. And he says to the captain, no man is a slave to another man. How much do you want for all these slaves? And the captain tells him, and John Woolman gives him the money. Then the ship leaves Philadelphia, goes up the coast along New Jersey and Long Island, up past Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, up past New Hampshire, and up past Maine. And where does the ship put in? Nova Scotia. And it is there that the Quakers opened the doors and set everyone free. Now, why does it remind me Why does it remind me of Oprah Winfrey? Because one day on her show, she was talking to her audience and she was having people call in with questions. And this woman called in and she had a question. I don't know what the question was, doesn't matter. Anyway, Oprah said to her, "From your accent, are you a black woman?" And the woman said, "Yes, I'm black." And Oprah, for whatever reason, I'm glad she did, Oprah said, "Can you tell me where you're calling from?" And the woman said, "Yes, Nova Scotia." And Oprah said, "I didn't know there were any black people in Nova Scotia." Oprah has to come to Harrisburg to see the painting by Violet Oakley, where they bought the slaves and took them to Nova Scotia. Now that's on one side of the door. The other side of the door is my favorite painting. My joke at the Capitol is, when you don't want to bring it to my, oh, of course it's massive, I'll take the painting, you see. It's called The Latch String. The Latch String. Now I have to tell you something about people, first of all, before I tell you about the, I'm getting as bad as Violet Oakley. I have to tell you another story. There are some people who like to live in the city, and there's some people that don't like to live in the city. I remember doing a tour once in New York, and it was a successful tour. Everybody was having a good time and this and that. And I said, "Well, how is it?" And the one man said to me, "Well, it's a very nice tour, but I can't wait to get out of here." He said, I feel like I'm claustrophobic. I think it's coming in on me already. I hate it here. And I found that interesting because there's some people that wouldn't ever leave New York City. Just love it, you see. Well, the point is this. Some people like the city and some don't. And when the colonies are being founded, of course, there were key spots up the coast, such as Savannah and so on, and Charleston and Philadelphia and so on. Anyway, in the Philadelphia area, the Quakers that were there, some of them preferred to live within the, quote, city, okay? And some of them, "No, I'm not going to live here. I'm getting out of here." So they moved out to the frontier. The frontier at that time was Chester County and Bucks County. That was the frontier. Now, when a Quaker and his wife move out on the frontier, the first thing he does is he builds a log cabin. And in doing the log cabin, you have the whole log cabin finished except the door. The door is last. You hang the door last. And when you hang the door, there's a procedure. You get the door and you drill a hole through the door. And through that door, through that hole, you put a huge conglomeration of rope, big rope through the door, big thick rope through the door. So that when I come to your house, being a Quaker, I can come at any time, 24 hours a day, my door is always open. I just take that rope, pull it, and the door is going to open. It doesn't matter if I come 3 o'clock in the morning, the door is open. That's called a latch string. A latch string. Well, this Quaker man and woman got married. He said to her, "I'm going to build you a log cabin," and he did. He built her a log cabin, and he was just about to hang the door on. And a group of Quakers came by, and they said to him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I just built my wife this log cabin. I'm about to hang the door and put out the latch string." And they said, "Well, don't do that. The Susquehannock Native Americans are on the warpath. They're scalping people. You better put a lock on your door." So he did, put the door up, put a lock on. And he went to bed, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, he got awake and he thought to himself, "What kind of a Quaker am I? I'm a Quaker and I have a lock on my door. That's ridiculous." Gets up, takes the lock off in the middle of the night, puts a latch string on, big rope. No sooner does he do that, the door flies open, and there are the Native Americans. Full war paint, tomahawks, they're ready to take scalps. And that's the painting. There's the cabin, the door is flung open, the Native Americans are rushing in, and of course, there's the Quaker and his wife, But the Native Americans come in, and they stand in the log cabin for a while, and they talk to each other in their native language, and they discuss something, and then they turn around and leave. So he shut the door and he went back to bed. About a month later, he's out plowing. And at this point, he can understand some of the Native American, he can't understand it all, but enough to talk briefly. And he's plowing his ground, and he looks up at a wooded area, And there's the chief standing. So he goes up to him and he says, "Have I seen you before?" And the chief says, "Yes." "Did you come to my cabin?" "Yes." "Did you come to kill me?" "Yes." "Why didn't you kill me?" And the chief looked at him and said, "Because I saw the latch string and I knew you were my brother." Thank you, Violet Oakley. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. People walk past it every day and don't even look at it. It's gorgeous. Well, she gets done with the state senate. And they say to her, "We have one more job for you to do. We want you to do the state Supreme Court." And by the way, I just got news of this. I can't believe it. The Supreme Court chamber at the Capitol is absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. In the middle of the room is a dome of green glass dome. Absolutely magnificent room. Now I hear tell that the Supreme Court doesn't meet there anymore. They've moved to another chamber. The room's not being used. Well, anyway, you'll see it as it comes up. Violet Oakley, do the Supreme Court chamber. So she does. She knows history so well, she's going to do the history of law. The history of law, you see. Well, over the door, she puts a monogram. It's cherubs flying and so on and so forth. And you have to look at it very closely because there's a big L in it, L-O-V-E, love, A-N-D-W-I-S-D-O, love and wisdom, it says over the door. This big monogram, love and wisdom, you see. And then she starts around the room. She's a historian, so it's in chronological order. First of all, she says there are different types of law. There's divine law, law of nature, revealed law, law of reason, common law, law of the nations, international law. She says there's all kinds of law when you think about it. So she's going to come all around the room. Divine law, that's the law from God. That's where God says to man, God gives man free will. Free will. There it is, you see. Then she goes to the Greeks. And when she goes to the Greeks, of course, the Greeks give us the greatest gift of all. The Greeks give us democracy. Democracy. Wow. I know when I was in Greece, felt like I went home when I went to Athens, you see, knowing what the Greeks had given us. Then she goes to Hebrew law. Remember, these are all huge murals, you see. Hebrew law, she has Moses and the Ten Commandments, you see. Then she goes to Christian law. She has Christ and the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. You see. Then she goes to the Code of Justinian. Justinian was one of the Roman emperors just after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but he's the one who took all the laws of the Roman Empire, put them together, put them in categories, and of course, a code book to the laws. Very big in the world of law, when you study law and so on, Justinian, the Roman emperor. Then she goes on, and she goes to English law. William Blackstone. And there's William Blackstone in England, first professor of English law. He said that man was made in the image of God. He also said that law is equal to all men. It doesn't matter who you are. And he was anti-slavery. Then she comes to the lawgivers. And there's William Penn. William Penn, you see. Well, she has William Penn. She has a number of people in that painting. Behind William Penn, with his arm extended over William Penn, is George Fox, you see, the Quakers. Hand over William Penn, you see, giving him the blessing. Also on that same side is John Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost. In the same painting are three other men that are important. Sir Thomas More. Sir Thomas More wrote the book, of course, Utopia, He wrote it in the 1500s. What's he saying in that book? Utopia, a perfect society, a society in which you have, can we say it in 1500? Education. Education, you see, that's what we need. Also she has in the painting, John Locke. You know, I had a lecture in here, I forget what the topic was not so long ago, and I talked about John Locke. I'm surprised we Americans have not gone to England, dug up the grave, and brought him to the United States and put him in a big tomb here in this country. We love John Locke. We love him. We remembered him when we wrote the Declaration of Independence. We know him when we wrote the Constitution. We love John Locke. John Locke said, the power doesn't come from God to the king to you. The power comes from God to you directly. You have the power. Wow, we love John Locke. You see. And the other one in the picture, besides John Locke, is Hugo Grotius, who is called the father of international law. Then she moves to another painting, you see, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, and she has two men in the painting. One is Thomas McKean. You're going to see it. He ruled over the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania for 22 years. And standing in the same painting is a man by the name of James Wilson. James Wilson, second lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania. James Wilson will give us the idea of popular sovereignty. Remember when we were moving west? People are moving west, and the big question in our country was, what are we going to do about slavery? When we open a new state, are we going to have slaves or aren't we going to have slaves? Well, here James Wilson jumps up and he said, I have a wonderful idea. Let the people decide. Take a vote when you get there. Whatever the vote comes in, then you'll have slavery or won't have slavery. Popular sovereignty. Then the next panel will really recognize the man because it's John Marshall, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. John Marshall is called the Babe Ruth of the Supreme Court. He gives us Marbury versus Madison. And what does it mean? It means the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court. You can go through every court in this country, but when it gets to the Supreme Court, whatever the decision is, that's the decision. She's almost at the end now. One of the last ones is called the International Court. And this, of course, has to do with The Hague in Holland after World War I, the 14 points, Woodrow Wilson, all of that, that's in the painting. I did the tour many, many, many times, and one time I'm standing there, and I got to this painting, and I did the lecture, and the woman looked at me and she said, "Don't you see what's in the picture?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Look at the picture again." You'll see it. I'm going to show it to you. There's Woodrow Wilson in the middle, and there are people at, of course, The Hague in Holland. They're all at a table talking. But it's the way they're grouped. There's the President of the United States. 3, 3, 3, 3. It's the Last Supper, Leonardo da Vinci. Now, she removed one person. I think she removed Judas. But it's when you're looking, oh, I said, I never saw that before. She said, well, look at it. It's the Last Supper of Christ. Well, there it is. And then finally, she ends, the very last panel there is Christ walking on the water, you see. And all the warships of the world are sinking. See, she's doing away with the warship. Violet Oakley said when she got old, her biggest disappointment in life was World War II. She couldn't imagine why people were fighting it. Why can't they learn and go on and stop killing each other? Can't think how unhappy she'd be today. Well, anyway, I'm going to switch now. I want to show you something. Oh, you'd love this book. If you'd love anything about the lecture, you would love this book. This book is incredible. It's called A Sacred Challenge. It's put out by the Pennsylvania Capital Preservation Committee. It's all of Violet Oakley's work in full color. It's absolutely a beautiful book. And if you call actually go online to the Capitol Complex and something, and so on, their bookstore at the Capitol Complex, it's probably there. A Sacred Challenge. I'm taking you through there today. You're going to see me take you through today. Okay, let's take a look at this now. Let me get this around. We get organized here. All right, I'm going through the book. This is Violet Oakley right here. This is Hester. Hester, remember the older sister? The older sister's on the right. There's Violet on the left in the little chair with the doll. That's Violet Oakley. This is, of course, the area that the Red Rose Girls took over, you see, outside of Philadelphia. And it would be in that area, in that house and barn and so on, that they set up their studio. I talked about this when they were going. Again, women at that particular time many times banded together, probably more force in being together than trying to do it alone at that time. Violet Oakley. Now this, of course, is if Joseph Houston would have went to Philadelphia, this is probably what he would have found. There was Violet Oakley in her studio and, of course, doing a much smaller job than she will be doing in Harrisburg. The governor's reception room. This is what it looked like before she came to Harrisburg. This is what it looked like. And if you see here, I hope this is coming out here. If you look up here, see, here's the paneling, you see? It was from here up. That's the portion that there was nothing there. And this is where she's going to be doing this whole story all the way around the room and up this side. There's nothing on this wall, this is just paneling. But there she's going to tell the story of William Penn. You'll know when I get halfway, about right in here is where he meets his father. Well, let's take a look at some of this, what was going on. And again, let me go back just a little bit here. Stick with me. Stick with me. Okay. One more. I don't want to miss something here. Okay, here we are. Now, in this case, this is this right here, William Tyndale. William Tyndale. And William Tyndale, at that particular point, if you notice, there's a printing machine in front of him. They're translating. What they're doing is the Bible into English, this indicates that the Bible now, although they're doing the printing in Germany, it's going over in English, and people are reading it in England itself, on the other side of the English Channel. Now, there's a panel here I've not put in. You don't need to see that today. That's William Tyndale at the stake being burned. Remember the turbulence. Here's Anne Askew, and of course here she is in the middle. She's the one who made the statement about the fact of the Holy Eucharist and so on and so forth. She's the one who, of course, will be tortured. It's told about in the book of what they did to her. Now, remember the terrible civil war in England. The terrible civil war, Oliver Cromwell against the king's forces. And here she has them, of course, on horseback, and she's showing you there's a civil war going on, and again, the turbulence. So she has the Reformation. Here she has an upheaval in the government of England. There's George Fox. There's George Fox. Notice she put him on top of a mountain. Look, the water zipping, because almost a message from God in his direction and so on. Here he's telling about people should directly go to God with their requests and so on, and that men are equal to women, and equal treatment for Native Americans and so on and so forth, and no more war. Remember, he is a conscientious objector. Now we're into William Penn. This is the scene where he's leaving. See Oxford University in the background? You can see Oxford University in the background, and those are Quakers meeting around the tree there. Well, you have to go to a place where nobody will see that you're having a meeting. You might be imprisoned. So there he is venturing forth, and he will ask them what it's all about, and it's there that he will decide to become a Quaker. Oh, there it is. Now it's a little bit darker on your screen with the lighting and so on. You can see over in here, look at Father. There's Admiral Penn at the table, and there's William Penn, head down, leaving the doorway. See, look at the dog following him. There's the dog licking his hand, you see, as if the dog's saying greater things happening. Look also she has a story everywhere. I know it's the age of discovery, but if you look in the back, look at the painting that's on the wall. It's ships. It's like she's giving little clues to what's coming up. Pennsylvania, discovery, settlement. She keeps telling you all little kind of hints in the picture. There's William Penn in jail. William Penn in jail, of course. He's being put in jail, and he's saying to the people, of course, a better day is coming, and we can all live together happily, and so on and so forth. Now, Here's William Penn, and he's rewriting all the things he wants to do in the future. When he finds this new land, here's all the things that are going to be established. Violet Oakley came back to the Capitol around 1960. Governor Lawrence was the governor. And she was waiting for him in the reception room. This woman, she's now in her late 80s. And she said to somebody, will somebody go out to the car for me? And they said, what for? She said, just go out and bring my paints in. So they brought the paints in. She said, does anybody have a ladder? So she put the ladder against her. She said, there's one of these paintings, just need a little bit of retouching. So there she goes up to the retouch. Anyway, she came to this picture. And she said, did anybody ever notice that in the back of the cell, I have a wee mouse? There's a wee mouse in the back of the cell. Nobody said, well, I didn't even notice it. She said, well, it's a very inspired mouse. I guess she'd know. And there he's gotten the land in the New World. Here he's saying to people, get on the ships, we're going over, there's a new land, and it doesn't matter who you are and where you came from, we're all going to live together. And then, of course, the last panel. Now, this is divided in half. The one on the right-hand side, your right-hand side, that's where he's getting the charter from Charles II. By the way, that charter is now in Harrisburg in the William Penn Museum, the charter. There's where he's getting the charter. And there he is on the ship, the Welcome. And you can see he's so pensive. What's going to happen in the New World? State Senate. Ah, unity. Unity. Notice how her hands are extended. She's pulling both sides of the wall towards her, you see. Unity. Notice she's sitting in the waters of life. The waters of life. There she is now. Now, you have to picture this because you're not there. If you were there, if I was doing the lecture there, it'd be perfectly obvious. She's in the middle. Now we're going to the extenditures, way out at the end. War. See how she hates war. And there they come. By the way, another story to tell you. If you notice in this painting, the Japanese flag is there, the rising sun. See, Japanese flag. In World War II, the day after Pearl Harbor was attacked, people came to the Capitol that day to go to work, and there was some commotion in the Senate chamber. And they went in, and there were people coming with ladders. They were going to go up and rub off the Japanese flag. They caught them just in time and put them out of the, or it would have been damaged, you see. Well, there she has it. She has the Japanese flag in the painting. So there they are. They're coming across. Remember, they're going to beat their swords into plowshares, you see. The closer they get to unity. And there, on the other hand, over here, slavery. Slavery, you see. But as they come across, their shackles will fall and they'll be free men, you see. Now, coming down this side over here, George Washington. There's George Washington, equestrian, going through Philadelphia. George Washington, you see. Now, here's the one with the message. Notice in the painting, there's Washington at the top. I see Benjamin Franklin here in the left in green. I see to the left there John Hancock. I see all that. But notice there's the books fell on the floor down at the bottom of the painting. At the bottom of the painting, look who's picking them up, the black man, you see. And what are they arguing about in the painting? All men are created equal. They're arguing that, but does it exist? No, it doesn't exist. She's telling you that in the painting, you see. Look at this one. This is, of course, George Gordon Meade, Battle of Gettysburg. Battle of Gettysburg, General Meade, you see. But here is the message. Now here again, you see Lincoln at the top delivering the address. There's Mary Wolin. See her standing there with the two children? She has lost her father and she has lost her husband. She's all alone now to raise those children. Violet Oakley's telling you, those are the untold things about war. War is not a happy thing, you see. People suffer. Well, I have to stop here for heaven's sakes. It's my favorite. The latch string. I love it. I love it. There's the Native Americans busting through the door. You see, there's the Quaker and his wife up against. See, they think they're going to be scalped and murdered and so on, and they really didn't. The beautiful story of the latch string. I knew you were my brother. There's the one for Oprah Winfrey, there of course is the head of the Quakers in Philadelphia, giving him the money for take all those black people and free them in Nova Scotia. Wonderful. Supreme Court. Now this is, and by the way, she's really tricky here. In fact, she had me on my toes here, finding where everything is. She's telling you love and wisdom. L-O-V-E, love. A-N-D, and wisdom, W-I-S-D-O-M. By the way, she has all these angels flying and so on with the monogram, but if you look way in the back, do you see there's a person looking at you? Here's the person up here. We think that's Hester, her sister. We think that's Hester, her sister. Here she tells the scale. I don't need to go through this. She's telling you there's all types of law as you come through the door. She tells the story. She doesn't have to be there. She tells the story. Look at this. This, of course, is, excuse me, this is divine law. This tells you that God gives all men free will. It comes directly from God, nobody else. Here, of course, she's talking about the Greeks. And in this particular case, the Greeks are giving us democracy. Remember, I talked about that before. There, of course, she's honoring the Greek law. There, of course, Hebrew law. You see Moses and the Ten Commandments. Again, this is chronological, going around the room. It's the whole story of law going around the Supreme Court chamber. There it is, Moses. And of course, this is, excuse me, this is Jesus, of course, doing the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. This is the Code of Justinian. And in this particular case, the Code of Justinian is Roman law. This is where he collects all the law and he puts it together, puts it in categories, and puts it into a new digest. And there she has more writing on the wall, so you know what's going on. This, of course, is William Blackstone, first professor of English law in England. She's honoring English law in this one. He's the one who said man is created and is the image of God. Man is of course, the image of God, and that law is equal to all men. It doesn't matter what your rank is in England, it's equal to all men, and he is anti-slavery. Now look at this one very closely. You see William Penn right in the middle. If you look to William Penn's left, you see the man with his arm extended over him. That's George Fox, of course, who gives us the Quaker religion, And then if you go up one more from Mr. Fox, right behind him, going up to the left, just to the left of that, that's John Milton from Paradise Lost. Now come over here, come up this side, and you'll see going up that side, the first one we have is Sir Thomas More, Utopia. Right in the middle, right in here, John Locke. The power doesn't go from God to the king to you. The power comes from God to you. Forget the king, just go around him. And finally, Hugo Grotius up in here, this would be the man who gives us international law. Now we're in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and she's looking at this man right here and this one who's talking on the floor. The one who's seated is Thomas McKean, who was ruled over the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania for 22 years. This man that's standing on the floor is James Wilson, who gives us the idea of popular sovereignty. Let the state decide if they want slavery or they don't. She's still going around the room, federal court. Now let's get to the Babe Ruth of the Supreme Court. And there he is, you see. And there we have John Marshall. John Marshall, quoted as being the Babe Ruth of the Supreme Court. He gives us Marbury versus Madison. The Supreme Court is the Supreme Court of the United States. You don't go any further. And when you get there, whatever the decision of the Supreme Court, that is the decision. Now here's the one I was telling you about. This has to do with international law at The Hague. And again, you see Woodrow Wilson and the 14 points, all of that coming about, the end of World War I and so on. But look how they're grouped. And the woman said to me, it looks to me like the Last Supper of Christ. Violet Oakley, very highly religious. I'm not. To me, it does too. She has them in threes. Except here, she has one removed here. I think she took Judas out. If Judas was back in there it is. It's Leonardo da Vinci. She's doing it all over again. And finally, look at this one. Christ walking on the waters. This is at the end as you're coming out the doors again. Christ is calming the seas. Christ is doing away with war. Christ is sinking the warships, you see. Sinking the warships. Well, I just want to tell you a few more things. Violet Oakley, of course, after doing the Capitol, she went to visit one of her heroes, Jane Addams in Chicago, who founded Hull House for people who needed a home to go to and so on. She went to visit her. She also did a big series of murals for the First Presbyterian Church of Germantown, Pennsylvania. World War II was a big disappointment for her, a very big disappointment. She attended, incidentally, the opening of the United Nations. The United Nations, when it opened in New York, she was there. She did many trips back to Europe again. She was very interested in art, very interested in history. She said that the story of William Penn was the turning point of her life. Interesting. Her favorite color, lavender. Lavender. Violet Oakley liked lavender. And of course, I told you the mouse story. Now I have to tell you one more thing. I put the whole presentation together and I went down and I rehearsed at the Capitol and I went from room to room. Anyway, it was finally advertised. I was going to do the lecture, which I've done a number of lectures down there for them. The first time we put it out, I had 85 people come to the Capitol. We were just thrilled. Well, that was enough, going from room to room, keeping track of 85 people. But 85 people came, and I was in the lobby getting ready to go. I had all my notes ready. I'm all ready. And the director came over to me, and she said to me, "Do you know what day it is?" I said, "I have no idea." She said, other than what day of the week it was. I knew what day of the week it was. She said, "Don't you know what it is today?" And I said, "I have no idea." She said, "It's Violet Oakley's birthday." I thought, isn't that interesting? By the way, at the Capitol, I don't know now because of the situation we're in, every year, up until recently, on Violet Oakley's birthday, they had a party. They had a party at the Capitol. I was invited to the parties. And I must tell you about one of the parties. It was very interesting. I was sitting, well, in a group of people. I was just one of many who were invited. But in the front row was an elderly woman, and I would say in her high 80s or 90s, an elderly woman. And she sat there, and of course they were honoring Violet Oakley, and they had the cake and the candles and so on and so forth. Anyway, the woman, and I can't tell you the name, but the woman was in the front row, and she was a friend of Violet Oakley. She was a friend of Violet Oakley. And with her, she was sitting there, and she had the tiniest of packages with her. And it was gift wrapped. It was gift wrapped. Anyway, when the party was over, they said that now it's time to hear from this woman. And she got up to the microphone and she said who she was and how she knew Violet Oakley, and that she had a present for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. She brought them a present. This little tiny box, you see. Well, what was in the box? When Violet Oakley did correspondence, she would seal her envelopes, and as the custom of that time, she would put wax on the envelope and then stamp it. And the stamp, of course, was the big V and O, Violet Oakley, stamp it. She opened the little tiny box, and the stamp was in the box, this thing that she used, the stamp. She gave it to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They very quickly took the box, and it was taken upstairs by security and locked in a safe. So kind of interesting. She died, 1961 she died. In fact, when she comes to Harrisburg and sees Governor Lawrence, the next year she will die. And she was 86 years old when she died. So again, the only thing I can say to you in closing today, there's one thing better than doing it this way. And the better way of doing is you go to our state capitol, and I'll go with you from room to room, and you look at the originals. It's really cool. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for coming today. And we're taking questions. We do have a question. We don't have a question.
We do.
We do have a question.
This question came in from several residents, and they would like to know why William Penn was in jail when he was in England. Was it because he was a Quaker?
William Penn was put in jail simply because of becoming a Quaker. A Quaker. Oh, yeah. Well, look. For any other reason, his father was very, very high in society. Very high, very esteemed, big house, and so on and so forth. No. The reason he became a Quaker, announced he was a Quaker, and what was going on at that particular time, especially under the reign of Oliver Cromwell, Quakers are being taken off the street. And of course you realize that's why they were meeting in the middle of fields and so on. No, he was arrested only because he was a Quaker religion. If he would have renounced that, they probably would have left him go, but no. And the only reason he got out of jail was the fact that the king owed his father some money, other than he was stayed in jail. But that is the reason he was thrown in. Yes, he was an English citizen, but he was of the Quaker religion. Quakers, Puritans, Pilgrims. Don't forget, just before that, you had the Pilgrims leave, you see, go to Holland, and then, of course, on to the New World and so on. Same business. Get out of England. It isn't good to be there at that time. It all depends what religion you are. You better be the right religion. No, he's in jail because he's a Quaker. Other question? No other questions. Thank you very, very, very much, and I look forward to next week. I'm back next Thursday. It will be announced later this week, the topic. Bye.